it's really lovely to see many people here, particularly given that this is what we're talking about, which is climate emotions. And what we thought we'd do today is I'll do a little bit of talking first of all, a mini presentation, and then for those of you who want to, we can do a mini climate cafe listening circle, which means it won't be recorded. That bit won't be recorded. The first bit can be recorded, but if you want to stay, if nobody wants to do the mini cafe, because normally they are an hour and a half long, and all we'd get is the chance for a few people to say something about how they're feeling. So it wouldn't be a full cafe experience, but we can do it, 20 minutes of it or so, and see how we go. So it's completely up to you. If we do the cafe and you're able to, if you can have your cameras on, that's great, because the cafe is really about connection. But if it's not possible for you, that's fine too. So what I'll do is, first of all, just invite anybody to go on mute if you're not already on mute. And we might just want to land for a moment. You probably just rushed from one meeting to another. And you might just want to, I don't know, take a few breaths and think about somewhere, perhaps in nature, that you really love to go to, that gives you that lovely sense of ease. And just bring that to mind. Lovely, just to land. So yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about what a Climate Cafe listening circle is. A bit of background about me, if you didn't know. I've been coming to some of these events. They're wonderful events. I'm a psychotherapeutic counsellor and a coach and a facilitator, and I've been doing this work, well, I've been doing that kind of work for around 35 years. I run a company called Aspey Associates and work a lot with leaders and teams and groups and individuals. And I do psychotherapeutic coaching, which is a sort of blend between therapy and coaching, as well as standard executive coaching and leadership development and things like that. And in the last 8 years, I've become very involved in climate change as an activist, as someone supporting activists, doing listening circles and debriefing circles and things like that. And I'm also on the board of the Climate Psychology Alliance, and we're a membership organisation and designed really to help us to confront some of the emotional, psychological aspects of climate change and everything that goes with that term, climate change. And one of the things that evolved from the work of the Climate Psychology Alliance was Climate Cafe listening circles. And what I thought I'd do is actually read you a bit of a blog that I'd written about a Climate Cafe listening circle to set the scene. And then I can explain a bit more about how they work. And then if for those who want to stay, we can go into a mini one. It's 10:30 on a Saturday morning and the room is filling up. 2 young women who arrive alone are helping themselves to tea. An elderly woman, walking with a stick, introduces herself as Anna, a refugee from Ukraine. A young man with headphones and a hoodie comes in and sits in the circle, next to another young man who's already seated, silently scrolling on his phone. They nod to each other. A middle-aged couple enter and head over to the refreshments table. He's pleased to see there's cake. Well, this is strange, isn't it, coming to talk to strangers? There are now 8 people, plus 2 of us facilitators. Sometimes more people come, sometimes less. In the centre of the room, we've placed chairs into a circle around a low table, on which is a wooden bowl filled with natural items, leaves, a lichen-encrusted twig, a black feather, stones, dried flower heads, acorns. My co-facilitator invites those still standing to take a seat in the circle. One young woman offers to move the extra seats aside if we don't need them, and helps Anna wobble down to her chair. We thank her. The middle-aged couple, sit together, chatting quietly. My co-facilitator closes the main door, which has a "Please do not disturb" sign on it. The room quietens and I welcome everyone. We introduce ourselves, my co-facilitator and I. We explain the format and we ask for agreements to listen, respect differences, and keep discussions confidential. This is not a space for action, but for exploring feelings. There is a sense of expectation, although that could just be me feeling that something important is waiting to emerge. To begin, I pick up the glistening black feather, sharing how it connects me to my love for wildlife and my grief over declining bird populations. I speak of feeling sad that the dawn chorus seems muted from how I remember it some years ago, and my guilt about having cats that occasionally catch birds. Others listen intently. Some appear moved by my words. After around 3 minutes, I place the feather back into the bowl and invite anyone else who wants to make a connection or select an item. One by one, participants speak, listened to without interruption. For some, their chosen object immediately brings feelings or a story to mind. One of the young men doesn't take an object, instead telling us about a walk he went on earlier that day along the beach and how outraged and helpless he felt on seeing litter everywhere. Several people nod intently. After a second round, where some resonate with what others have shared, or they tell a new story, we close, offering further support if needed. Some take a leaflet. Once everyone leaves, my co-facilitator and I take time to reflect before heading our separate ways. So has anyone here been to a Climate Cafe listening circle? Yeah, Penny, you have. Does that describe anything like your experience of it?
I actually facilitate one, Linda. Yes, it does. Although we are a group of people that mainly know each other, it's not closed. But yeah, so I'm interested in understanding how we might grow it in a different way and maybe set up another one.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll tell you a little bit more about them. I mean, cafes, climate cafes, as we know, they exist all over the world in various formats. Some are serving as hubs for local action groups. Some are, come along, we're going to do some posters, we're going to get ready for a march, we're going to have a guest speaker to talk to us about it, and then we have tea and cake and a cup of coffee and stuff, and that's a climate cafe. At the Climate Psychology Alliance, we in the last year, when I took over the lead role of looking after Climate Cafe facilitation and training and supervision from Rebecca Nestor, who co-designed the model that we have now, well, the original model, we've since adapted that model and extended it differently. So we very much focused on listening circles because whilst there's some fantastic things going on and great spaces to do stuff together, often the focus is so much on doing stuff that the feelings don't get verbalized or even metabolized. And in a way, what happens in mainstream society is that our feelings about what's happening just don't have a space often. We call it socially constructed silence. There's a socially constructed silence around the enormity of what's happening, so we don't talk about it in the way, unless we talk about it related to a solution often. So these are spaces just for feeling and sharing those feelings, developed by Rebecca and Gillian Broad from the CPA. And actually, we don't tend to publicise this too much, but just so you know the roots of it, they were inspired by the Death Cafe model. Because death is a similar kind of set of taboos, that people don't really talk about death until it happens. And so this is a way of being able to express and articulate how we feel. So it's really important psychologically and emotionally speaking that we do find ways to do these things, and we don't have any talks, we don't have any advice, and we don't have any pressure to act. There's no expectation that people are going to join or come back or sign up to anything or to promise to do anything. because the relief at just going somewhere and saying, this is how I feel. So the circles, they welcome all kinds of emotions. We don't know what's going to come. Those can be anything from, fear, ambivalence. I know I've got to change my life and I don't want to. I've got children that I want to travel. I want them to have the opportunity that I had, and yet I'm feeling guilty about them going on flights. Some of those things. Shame about what we've done. Sometimes hope. Often a lot of love for nature, and tenderness. People often talk about tenderness. And what often arises too is numbness. I don't feel anything, and I think I feel I should, but I don't feel anything, and I'm finding it hard to connect with what's going on, so I find it easier not to. So many of these emotions that we have and hear in cafes are actually deemed taboo by society. We even have a word for it. We call them negative emotions. It's just astonishing how psychology has called things negative. They're sources of information. They're valid feelings. No wonder we've got a repressed nation in many ways. In many cultures, and societies, and including in many parts of the UK and certainly in political spheres, denial and disavowal are quite common. So denial is saying it's not happening. Disavowal is knowing it's happening and not knowing it's happening. So it's juggling those two parts in your mind at the same time. I know it's going on, and I'm just going to carry on as normal and pretend it's not. We also often can morph into, when we try to talk about climate emotions, we can morph into something that's often called toxic positivity or hopium. It'll be fine, we'll fix it, tech will save us. I work with somebody on a council that regularly says tech will save us, and I say, which tech is that then, and for which of these multiple problems we have? And they don't really have an answer. But that's just their way of them alleviating any pain they might be feeling, perhaps. So what often happens is people in society, mainstream, people polarize, and that happens too in climate cafes. We might have someone saying it's all dreadful, and might have someone saying we will be fine, I have a lot of confidence. So it's allowing all of those without judgment to surface. So just something else about socially constructed silence. What we often, this is an idea that it's a conscious, unconscious, collective process really that's happening, is that something's difficult to talk about individually and collectively, and so we don't talk about it, and society makes it hard to, like any taboo. And what happens with that is another interesting phenomena, is that if you're not talking about it, if society doesn't talk about climate in the way that, unless they're talking about it being full of, we can solve it, we don't think about it either. So the suppression of talking leads to the suppression of thinking. So it kind of explains why, or partly explains why, large swathes of society are walking around as if nothing's happening. And understanding this myself a few years ago made me a lot more compassionate about people who weren't kind of getting it, because people often bring rage to the cafes. And why is nobody talking about? Why aren't they getting it? Why aren't they seeing how serious it is? Why are they still consuming and spending and wasting? And so you get a lot of that frustration. So as climate impacts become undeniable, more and more people are breaking out of this climate bubble, and they have nowhere to put their feelings, or limited spaces. So that's what these cafes offer, is this absolute relief. And it's a universal word. Every cafe I've ever facilitated, people say it's just such a relief. So many people come and express inadequacy, including just feeling they're not doing enough. And that includes people who've been imprisoned for activism. They still don't feel they're doing enough. So the enormity of this crisis can make us feel really small, and it challenges as well any predetermined assumptions we had about control over our lives, because this is something that's very hard to control. And people come along and they do think they lament the futility of recycling when they know that it's just all getting put into trash somewhere else, and it's being delivered around the world. So some of those things happen. And there's often anger. People talk about businesses who greenwash. claiming to do better for the planet. So there's a lot of rage that's often directed at greenwashing attempts. People increasingly come along and talk about collapse. And the first time that happened in a group, I was facilitating it, and I thought, oh crikey, I hope this isn't really going to upset people, because talking about climate change is one thing, talking about collapse takes it into a sort of different space. And what was interesting was how many people said, yeah, I thought that too, but they hadn't been able to say it before. Some say they've given up, there's nothing they can do, and they've just come along to see if they can feel a little bit better today, because they see a predicament with no solution. And so they might even say, well, I might well do the hell what I like. I might as well go on all of those trips and those cruises and those holidays and eat as much steak as I want. But actually, what's very interesting is once people have said how awful they feel and how conflicted they feel and how futile they feel, by the end of the cafe, they often say, do you know what I am going to do? I'm going to get a bit involved in my local group. Won't hurt, will it? I might go and do, I don't know, a litter pick. It might not make any difference, but I think it'll help. So those are some of the things that people bring, and they bring everyday dilemmas too. They, how do I stay in this job when I'm destroying stuff, when I'm selling rubbish to people? If I leave an industry, do I abandon the chance to change it from the inside? But do I go somewhere else and accept, often in sustainability jobs, much, much less money? What do I do? So everything comes, just everything. And in sort of 7 years of running them now and being in them and teaching them, nothing kind of surprises me anymore. But the one thing that's just the universal feeling is relief, and stop feeling so alone with their feelings. So what it does actually help is speaking feelings aloud seems to bring some kind of acceptance, and it's not often a resigned giving up kind of acceptance. It's not that end of, and it's all shit anyway, so what's the point? There does seem to be some refueling of agency. And because we don't put pressure on people saying, okay, sign up and come to the next meeting or join your local group of something here, when we meet people again, if they do come back, they say, oh, I looked at my local group and I did some things, or I went on a tree planting group. And they might be small things, but it's moved them from paralyzed and often really quite depressed to just a different state. And also they've named forbidden thoughts sometimes. So sometimes people say things, they can share really quite dark feelings about their grandchildren and things like that, or their children and the lives they have. And that's really taboo in many places to talk about that. So because they've been given permission to do that, that's what can happen. A phenomenon that can often happen when our cafes run for 18-year-olds plus, or 16 with a caring parent or guardian. But we do have youth groups as well. We have youth spaces and youth circles, and it always has to be age appropriate. But what we find is when younger people are in the group and other members of the group are much older, that can be quite difficult, because people feel really bad for the young person present, and they can either dump it all on the young person and say, well, it's up to you to fix it now, or they just talk about how bad they feel, or they overly praise young people. They say, oh, I think you're marvelous, you young people, what you're doing. So you kind of manage that as facilitators. So hearing people struggle with same dilemmas often helps. Hearing people struggle about to fly or not, or to eat meat, whatever, that seems to help. And it certainly opens the door when they leave to having better productive conversations with family and friends. Doesn't mean to say they're going to go straight out and be fluent in having climate conversations, but even telling a friend, I've been to a climate cafe listening circle, and it was really helpful. That sort of spreads the word. So whilst they're not therapy, they seem to be therapeutic. So talking and sharing strengthens connection, and it helps people to stay awake to reality without being overwhelmed. Because it's ritualistic, it's sitting in a circle with objects of nature, other parts of nature, it sort of offers a pathway to some kind of deeper conversation. And it normalizes really important skill of any therapist, if anyone's ever had the chance to have some therapy, the normalizing aspect is just wonderful. Someone says, yeah, I understand you feel that way, rather than I'm wrong to feel like this or I'm ashamed of how I feel. And so while there's no expectation of action, people generally leave feeling a lot more engaged. And it's neither a therapy group nor is it a completely informal group. People don't just drop in. We can't have that. That would make it very difficult to manage all of the comings and goings. So it's a hybrid, and it's not perfect. Things go wrong. People leave occasionally, and that's what we always have two facilitators. I'm not having two here today simply for this, and as one person said at the close of a session, said it was really good to be real today, even if just for this time alone. So our Climate Cafe listening circles open to anybody. We have them online. People like Penny do them around the country in their local groups for small communities, small and closed communities, always people who regularly come. Sometimes they're one-off. We run ours online. I run mine online, and we run at Climate Psychology Alliance. We run training for people to facilitate them. And since I've taken the lead on training, we've evolved our model to be a longer training so that people get more understanding about how to facilitate well. And also what's really important for me is that these are not in the hands of psychologists or therapists. These are listening spaces held by citizens for citizens. So once someone's done the training, I mean, they can do it without the training, but we offer training, locals training, to any community group or any individual without any therapy or psychology training to hold a decent listening space by citizens for citizens. So I'll stop there, and I'm going to suggest we make a choice now. Who would like to actually take part in a small listening circle for a while? We have raised hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lovely. If you would like to stay, and we'll do that. And if you wouldn't like to do one, because we can't have observers, I'm going to invite you to leave, and then you can see the recording afterwards. Does anyone leaving? I don't want to put you on the spot. It's a horrible thing, but does anyone need to leave and not be part of this? Okay, all right. And I'm hoping that if we just do we'll just do a, you have to go. Okay, thanks, Gary. If you have any questions about them afterwards, because we're not going to do we'll have 5 minutes at the end for questions, but if they haven't been answered, then you can contact me directly.
I see it's still recording though.
Yeah, we're going to stop the recording now. Back on. Thank you. So that was a very short experience of the cafe. It was speeded up. We normally allow an hour and a half, and normally we get chance for 2 rounds. So what tends to happen in the first round is people pick up an object and share some feelings. And then as the stories build and people hear more, they begin to identify and make connections a lot more. You've already been making connections in what we just did, but there's this relief, oh gosh, someone else thinks this too. Someone else has these dilemmas. And so we become less polarized as well. We can't be all right or all wrong or all perfect or all bad. So that helps as well to manage some of the very powerful emotions we can have that cause us to split, as we call it, psychologically, is to, that's all bad and that's all good, and they're all bad, and all those people that do that are bad, and all those people that do that are good. So that helps in that psychological defense process. So that's an hour and a half, and we encourage people to be mindful of the space. You already are, because you work often in these groups together, so you know what turn taking looks and feels like. And often people can get into sort of intellectual conversations, and that can be quite useful. But because we're more used to that, we try and encourage people to stay with feelings and say, it is difficult to stay with feelings, but if you can, that you might find that helpful. I certainly know that one of my go-to defense processes is intellectualization. I can get very geeky about stuff, and it stops me from feeling really. I can go, oh, that's interesting, another zero point 0.2 degrees of something. So that's one of my go-to defenses, and I wasn't aware of that until I started doing climate work. And I just thrown myself into various trainings and courses and hungry for knowledge, and realizing it was only that when I saw funny enough, a coral reef expert speaking on stage at Oxford University, and he was the first person I'd seen in a 2-year learning journey at various climate institutions. He's the first person I'd seen who actually showed any real feelings on the stage. And I thought, wasn't that extraordinary? And I thought, and as he got upset, I got upset. And then I realised it's not only extraordinary, I've been doing exactly the same myself for the last couple of years. As Freud would call it, a flight to health. I'm fine. I don't need to worry about my feelings. So that's how we allow. Often we have long periods of silence, and that's fine too. And that can make some people feel a bit awkward, but we manage that. And that the aim is to make the place as safe as possible in the time we have for people to contribute as fully as they would like to. There's never any pressure. And that we all carry different experiences. So I'll stop there and see if any questions are coming up for people about how you might apply this, or what it might be like for your context, or anything like that I could answer. And just pop your hand up if you've got a question, or if no question, a reflection or an observation. Penny.
Yeah, I'm interested in the question that I sort of raised when I did my share about the how long emotions last and how much you think our reactions are the stories that we create because of our experiences. And I'm hoping that there will be some information about how we access training and maybe for those of us who are, well, yeah, just how we access training and stuff like that we can do, please.
Absolutely, yes. I don't know the exact timing of how long an emotion lasts, but yes, your daughter's absolutely right about this layering. We can layer meaning. We make meaning. It's the meaning we make out of things that causes us some of the challenges that we all have in life anyway. It's the meaning we make of what we see as a threat, and where we see our power lies, and all of those things. So yeah, it's the meaning and then the layering. And then humans are terribly clever at having an emotion about an emotion. So I can be guilty about being shamed, and I can feel shame about being guilty. So we're quite complex in that way, and we can feel very guilty for not caring. So
Okay.
apathy it's not actually an emotion, but numbness is kind of thing. But we can feel guilty about that. Yeah. And in terms of training, at the Climate Psychology Alliance, we run regular trainings for Climate Cafe Listening Circle facilitators. We've just evolved it from a 1-session training to 3 sessions. So we ask people to go on a Climate Cafe Listening Circle themselves first, and those can be local ones, or they can be online anywhere, and those are all listed on our website. And that enables people to first of all have that important experience of sharing yourself, because one of the things that humans are also very good at doing is thinking, I've got to learn how to do this for others without doing it for ourselves. So we ask people to go along to a cafe and experience that, and then they sign up for our training, and that's the first session is another cafe where we actually spend some time in the cafe, and then we debrief on what it was like to be in the cafe, and we look at aspects of that. The second session is some of the understandings that we bring to the Climate Cafe, how they work, how they're structured, why, and how to facilitate one. And then so the first session is 3 hours. Well, the cafe, first of all, they go to an hour and a half. And then when they start training, it's a 3-hour training. Second session is 3 hours. Usually it's a couple of weeks later, because we send some pre-session reading, inter-session reading about climate psychology, about the ideas and the practices behind climate cafes, and about facilitation skills. Second session is 3 hours where they come and we talk a lot about that content. And then they have usually another month where they go away and ideally start their cafes, or sometimes 6 weeks. And then the third session is for them to come back and do some reflection on how that was. And we offer training a discounted training to CPA members, and it's relatively cheap to join. It's sort of, I think it's 70 quid a year. And for that, you get free supervision of Climate Cafe listening circles. So you can come monthly to a free supervision session, well, inclusive, and you get cheap trainings and access to all of our events. And you don't need to be a climate psychologist to be a member of the Climate Psychology Alliance, or any kind of
Okay.
ologist, actually. We have all sorts of people, nurses, doctors, social workers, council workers, industry leaders, all sorts of people.
But
So that's, if you go to our website,
yeah,
climatepsychologyalliance.org.
okay. I think someone's put it in the chat. Thank you for that. And just a very short last reflection is that from certainly this last week, one of the things I think is really important is we all need to do this work, because being able to talk to one another, particularly now we have such polarized sort of communities, there's so many things that are dividing us, and we need to develop and hone the skills that I think unfortunately we've lost to some extent about engaging with one another and being able to understand a different point of view without actually coming to blows and feeling that we can't be friends. I'm feeling that very strongly at the moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Something else we do, we run training in-house. So this year I've worked with two very large national conservation organisations. We've trained in-house teams of listening circle facilitators so that they can run these regularly. This is particularly helpful for people working in conservation on the front line, who are measuring and witnessing losses, ecological losses by the day. So they run them once. One of my large organisational clients, a CPA client, they run cafes all over the UK, and they do some in person and they do some online, and that's really helpful. So you don't need to come to us Climate Psychology Alliance. You can run your own once you're up and running, and come to us for supervision and support. We've got a few more minutes. Any other questions or observations?
You just had a thought for Penny, Linda, which was that I find that the algorithms in social media nowadays are quite responsible for the extreme feelings we get, because you look at something and it says, oh, you like that, so I'll give you more and more and more. And you end up with quite a biased view, and it's difficult to find something that will bring you back to a closer balance to what is actually going on. I think media has a lot of responsibility for our education, and they're not doing a very good job at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts or reflections? So I'll just put the website address in there, and also the Climate Psychology Alliance. We have a database of practitioners who offer three free sessions of counselling or therapeutic support, really, for anybody that wants them, to do with climate related emotion. So you'll find that on our website under the support section. So yes, and we support research and papers and things like that. So yeah, but if you've got any direct questions about, I personally do coaching. I work with people at leadership level and teams and offsites and stuff like that. We also run workshops on the work that reconnects. I'll be doing a session for you in the new year. So we can do all sorts of things that support the ongoing conversations. And currently just looking at, quickly to tell you about ICRA, which is the Inner Climate Response Alliance, of which I'm a part through my CPA, Climate Psychology Alliance. This is a partnership between the Climate Majority Project, the Mindfulness Initiative, and the Climate Psychology Alliance. And it's a lottery-funded 5-year project to bring inner climate response work into communities, so that where there's a climate action group, there's access to emotional, psychological support too. So we're currently working on that to try and get this extended away in a way. That's not the deliberate thing, but this does not need to be in the hands of ologists or therapists. This is really about enabling communities to have, as you've already said, these better conversations, these less polarized conversations, because as we know, climate isn't just climate, it's social injustice, it's inequality, it's all of those things. So that's what ICRA is doing. So ICRA, Inner Climate Response. Climate Response. So if you want to keep an eye on what we're doing, sign up to our mailing list, both the CPA and ICRA, and then you'll get to hear about initiatives we're supporting, networking and stakeholder engagement and stuff like that. 3 minutes left. Any final thoughts?
Well, whilst people are thinking, let me just say thank you, Linda, for yet another of your very absorbing sessions. It's always fascinating to see what comes out of these things. So thank you very much. And for those of you who are wondering what's coming next week, it's going to be, I think, of great interest to most people. It's the parish response to local plans and neighbourhood plans. So when you have just been told, as we've just been told, that despite all the parish councils' cancellation or determination to kill a development project, we've been told that we've been overruled and the 136 houses are going to be put up in a field which everyone knows floods at a regular basis. And no one knows where they're going to go to the dentist or the doctor, and certainly nobody knows how they're going to support themselves because there aren't any jobs here. But nevertheless, the government knows better. And I suspect, I'm hoping that the developer will go out of business because we've already got one group of 56 houses of which they built the first 9 and they can't sell those. So why they've approved another 136 is a good, fascinating guess. So anyway, next week, come and find out what you can do in your parish council when you're coming up against issues with the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. So look forward to seeing you.
Excellent.
Anybody
Okay.
else got anything for Linda, please?
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you very much.
thanks very much.
Yep.
Well,
Brilliant.
I'll
Thank
just
you very
share
much
one
indeed.
final thing, which is oh, I didn't mean to share that. I'll just pop in the chat. This is the article, the blog I wrote, from which I read at the start. So you just a bit of a case study on climate cafes. So feel free to read that or share it if you want to tell somebody else about what they are. Thanks very much for your really warm, full-hearted participation and your courage in showing up to do this as well amongst your peers.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.